video features a side-by-side comparison of the Gransfors Bruk's Wildlife Hatchet and Gransfors Bruk's Small Forest Axe. Now, if you're interested in this small forest axe, you've probably done a bit of research, and if you have, you realize it can be very difficult to get your hands on this. So I found myself on a 2-month waiting list trying to get my hands on this axe. And so during that time I got a little bit itchy and scratchy. I was kind of curious about the quality, and so a little bit easier to get your hands on is this smaller Gransfors Bruk's Wildlife Hatchet. And so I picked up one of these, and now I have both of them and figured I'd give you a quick side-by-side comparison so you can see how they stack up against each other. So one of the first impressions I had right off the get-go, and keeping in mind that I got the Wildlife Hatchet first, is that these axes really are pretty small. They're not very large, they're compact, and that's a good thing. They're actually made for backpacking and camping and the ability to carry them around with you, and so the actual overall size is pretty appealing. Now, if you see here, we have the Wildlife Hatchet on the left, and we have the Small Forest Axe on the right. And immediately you'll notice that these two heads are a considerably different size. They're a slightly different shape, but somewhat similar. And at the same time, they are quite different in the actual overall size. The next thing you'll notice is the shape and length of the handle. Both of them are quite different. But the good thing is that they both exhibit a nice palm swell and also have a lanyard hole. Now, some of these other Gransfors Bruk's models do not have the lanyard hole. Obviously, you could add one if you wanted to by drilling it out, but these do come standard with that drilled in. So for me, that's good. I like having a lanyard. I still have to add one to my Wildlife Hatchet, but I started working on one for the Small Forest Axe, and so anyway, that's a nice feature that I tend to like, just to give me something to wrap around my wrist and kind of help me maintain control. When you start matching these up one on top of the other, you really start to see the difference in the size. Now, when you look at the actual length of the cutting edge, they're pretty close. So the cutting edge itself is very close in shape and size, but the actual beard, I guess you would call it, on the underside of the blade takes a drastically different shape depending on which axe you're looking at. The overall head length of the hatchet is much shorter than the overall head length of the axe, and that's where this thing starts to kind of draw its difference. And when you compare the backside of the head of these axes, the Small Forest Axe has a considerably larger strike area than on the hatchet. So you might find that desirable if you're going to be doing a lot of pounding of steaks or different items using these tools. All Gransfors Bruk's tools come with the name of the maker stamped into the actual head. From what I can tell, a lot of the Wildlife Hatchets come with MM, and a lot of the Small Forest Axes come with AS. So I feel like you probably get a very consistent feel from these if you went from one hatchet to the next, because you know the same guy's going to be making them time and time and time again. So they're probably reasonably consistent. Now, I've never had two of these hatchets side by side to compare them, and in the same way I've never had two of these Small Forest Axes side by side to compare them, just for the overall, I guess what you'd say, like quality and consistency from one tool to the next. But like I said, I do know that in typical situations, it seems as though the same guys tend to work on the same axes, probably while they make mass quantities or batches of these things. Now, the next thing you'll see is the shape of the sheaths are quite different. On the left is the sheath from the Small Forest Axe, and on the right is the sheath from the Wildlife Hatchet. Now, you can tell that the craftsmanship is very similar on both. Both have very similar snaps in similar locations, and both have these grommets holding it together. So in that regard, they're very similar. They're this exact same color, so the leather work is very consistent. The only main difference really being the shape for which fits each particular tool. So on the hatchet you do have, I guess, a little bit of material that goes up over the top of the axe. Now here's a subtle detail that you may or may not notice. On the right I have the small forest axe, and on the left I have the Wildlife Hatchet. You'll notice on the right, on the small forest axe, that there's actually a metal wedge installed in the top of the handle to help hold it together, and there is not on the left hand side on the Wildlife Hatchet. Now I actually did reach out directly to Gransfors Bruk, and they assured me that there was no need for the wedge. In fact, they sent me a lengthy description and a link to their website stating how they've improved quality in the production of these tools, and in certain models they no longer need the wedge. And if you've also followed Gransfors Bruk, you'll know that they have a mission to reduce the amount of overall impact on the environment and reduce waste. And so by them increasing the quality of their handles in production, they've also been able to minimize the amount of materials that they need. So it's actually pretty cool that they've engineered a way out of using the wedge. And so if you get one that does not have a wedge, it's actually perfectly normal. So I got to the point where I had to ask myself, which one of these tools is going to chop better? Just because I have a bigger head and a longer handle, does that mean that the small forest axe will chop better than the Wildlife Hatchet? Who knows? So what I figured I'd do is just a quick 10 chop test between these two to see which one performed better. So first I'm going to perform my 10 chops using the smaller Wildlife Hatchet. And next, I'll perform my 10 chop test using the small forest axe. Alright, so a couple of things here. First is, with the Wildlife Hatchet, I'm hoping I gave it a good enough try. I mean, I wasn't as accurate as I would have liked to have been with my strikes. I think I approached it a little bit haphazardly and wasn't trying as carefully as I could. But at the same time, I definitely didn't have the same heft behind it or the ability to really bury quite as deep as I did with the small forest axe. And when you look here, I definitely got much deeper penetration in my cuts. Now at the same time, maybe that's simply because I was more accurate with my strikes, but just the way it felt, I could definitely tell using the small forest axe. I had a lot more weight behind the strike, and I could tell that it was hitting harder. So like most good tests, I feel like you might need to do this more than once. I'm going to give it one additional try just to give it another shot and make sure that I'm more accurate with this Wildlife Hatchet. So let's give it a shot. I'll go with the hatchet first. That was pretty good. I felt like I gave that a really good effort. And so now we'll do the same with the small forest axe. I mean, I was pretty much dead nuts on with the Wildlife Hatchet. I felt like I had really good strikes. I hit where I was aiming. I felt like I took all the chunks that I could. And then with the small forest axe, you'll notice I went much wider. You know, this was pretty tight. Here I went wider and I had one blatant miss. And so even at that, I was able to get much deeper penetration, deeper bites, and really send a lot more wood. So I think if you had to make a decision between the two, and size wasn't your you know, critical reason for purchasing one versus the other, I think I would suggest the small forest axe, simply because it's still a reasonably small package but also gives you deeper penetration in your cuts. Now the next thing I'd like to add, however, is that there are obviously many reasons why you choose a tool and many different uses for these tools. So depending on exactly what you want to do, you may go one way or another. And what I'm talking about is, let's just say you wanted to use an axe to carve. Now I've been thinking about doing a little carving with my hatchet, and I thought, you know, am I really going to be able to perform that same exact task with this small forest axe? And so, you know, as I hold this small forest axe and try to think about doing like finer tasks with it, or, you know, choking up, it actually feels a little bit unwieldy because I have a bigger head here. But even more importantly, the reason why I think it feels odd to me is I have all this length beneath my hand, so it doesn't make for a really nice balanced tool in my hands. Now the opposite is true with the hatchet. I have a nice small head, fits beautifully in my hands, and I don't have all that much handle beneath me, so at that particular time, you know, this feels better, and so I think I might be able to do some finer tasks with this versus, you know, the actual small forest axe. So maybe that's another thing that you need to keep in mind. And actually, that reason alone is the reason why I decided to keep both of these, because I really do want to start getting into carving and using an axe to do it, because I think it's a good tool for that, and it gives you, you know, different control, and it's a completely different skill from using a knife. So I would really like to start learning how to carve with an axe, and I think this hatchet would be the one to do it. So there you have it, a side-by-side comparison of two beautiful tools. These things are gorgeous. For a very reasonable price, you can get your hands on a traditionally made, handmade, hand-forged tool made of premium steels that pretty much should last you a lifetime. I hope you found this video informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate all your support. I hope you guys will come back soon. And like always, take care now. I'll see you soon.